I was returning from a meal at my nephew's house when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Keep a sharp eye on your surroundings. A cold dread crept up my spine. Was this a threat? I typed, my fingers hesitant. The reply was unsettling. This is salvation. Just a few minutes later, the tranquility of my evening was shattered by a hammering on my front door. The 3 sharp, forceful knocks were a clear sign of someone on edge. "Open up! I know you're in there." Lionel's voice was hoarse and desperate, a sound that made my gut tighten. I calmly placed my teacup on the table, the small clink echoing in the stillness. Adjusting my spectacles, I walked to the front hall, bracing myself for the chaos I knew awaited me. The moment I unlatched the front door, Lionel pushed his way in. His clothes were creased and sweat beaded his brow despite the cool autumn air. He nervously raked his hands through his messy hair, his eyes darting around the living room like a trapped animal. "Dad, I need $150,000. It's an emergency." The words spilled out in a breathless rush. This is a matter of life or death. I closed the door softly, watching my 38-year-old son pace the wooden floor like a lion in a cage. His breathing was heavy, his movements erratic. Life or death? A familiar wave of disappointment washed over me. "Lionel, how many times have I heard this before?" I asked, my voice flat. "You don't get it, Dad. These people don't play games." He whirled around, his face a mix of fear and fury. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked on, measuring the long silence between us. I studied his face, noticing the dark rings under his eyes, the way his jaw muscles jumped. This was more than just another gambling debt. This was something darker, more dangerous. "I'm not playing games either," I said, though my heart was pounding. "That's enough. Get your head on straight." Lionel's fist slammed down on the oak dining table with a loud crack. The sturdy table, a family heirloom, didn't even wobble, but his knuckles were red as he cradled his hand. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he snarled. "They don't accept late payments." I sank into my favorite recliner, the worn leather a familiar comfort. From here, I watched him resume his frantic pacing. "Tell me about these people," I said quietly. He stopped, his back to me. The only sounds were the clock's ticking and his ragged breaths. When he finally turned, his expression had changed. The panic was still there, but now something cold and calculating lay beneath it. "Marco Castellanos and his partner. They control everything on the west side." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I borrowed money to pay off some other debts. And now you've dug yourself into an even bigger hole." I finished his sentence with a sigh that felt bone deep. "Lionel, I've been bailing you out for 20 years. Every time you swear it's the last." He dropped to one knee beside my chair. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to climb into my lap for comfort after a nightmare. But the resemblance was only skin deep. His eyes held no innocence, only desperate, transparent manipulation. "This time is different, Dad. They gave me until tomorrow evening. If I don't pay—" He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. "They showed me pictures of what they do to people who don't pay." The weight of his words filled the room. I searched his face for a flicker of truth. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. Once, then fell silent. $150,000, I repeated slowly. "Where exactly did this money go, Lionel?" His gaze shifted, landing on a spot just over my shoulder. "Poker, high-stakes games and backroom clubs. I was winning for weeks, Dad. I was so close to paying everything off. And then you lost it all." The pattern was painfully predictable. "You don't understand what it's like," Lionel said, clenching his fists. "The pressure, the strategy, the thrill when the cards fall just right. I'm good at this, Dad. I just need one more." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "I won't do it." In a flash, Lionel's face changed. The mask of desperation fell, revealing an ugly hostility. His eyes narrowed, and his voice took on a hateful edge I'd never heard before. "You've always been selfish. All your love was for that company." I remained in my chair, watching this stranger who wore my son's face. The grandfather clock ticked on, oblivious to the storm brewing. "I worked for you, for your future," I said quietly. "For my future," he laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. He started pacing again, his movements now more aggressive, his hands gesturing wildly. "You don't even know my birthday." November 12th. I answered instantly. "And I remember every gift you broke or sold." The truth of it stopped him. His face flushed even redder, and for a moment I saw a flicker of shame before it was swallowed by rage. "That's right. Throw it in my face." He shouted. "Every mistake, every failure. You keep a running tally of all my faults, don't you?" He moved around the room like a hurricane, knocking into the coffee table and sending my newspaper sliding to the floor. The lamp on the side table wobbled as he passed. "I keep a tally of love," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos. "Every time I picked you up from the precinct, every debt I paid, every second chance I gave you." "Love?" He spun around, his eyes wild. "You call control love? You call manipulation love?" The irony was thick in the air. My son, who had just tried to manipulate me with threats and a sob story, was accusing me of the very behavior he'd perfected. I shifted in my chair, the leather creaking. "Lionel, sit down. Let's talk about this calmly." "Calm?" His voice cracked. "There's nothing calm about having a price on your head. Nothing calm about knowing that tomorrow night if I don't have their money, they'll—" He stopped, running his hands through his hair again, leaving it even more disheveled. Sweat had soaked through his shirt. "You'll be sorry, old man," he said in a low, menacing tone. The words hung in the air, making it feel heavy and dangerous. For the first time, I felt a genuine chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Lionel moved toward the mantel, where family photos were neatly arranged. He hovered over them for a moment before picking up the silver-framed portrait of Martha, a young him and me. We were at the old state fair. Martha's smile was bright. Young Lionel on my shoulders, all of us squinting into the sun. With deliberate slowness, he held the frame at eye level. "Maybe it's time you learned what real consequences feel like." The frame slipped from his fingers, or maybe he just let it fall. The silver frame hit the hardwood floor with a loud crack, and the glass shattered across our faces. The sound seemed to echo for an eternity. For a moment, we both just stared at the damaged photo. Martha's face was bisected by a long crack, and Lionel's childhood image was fractured into 3 pieces. "Get out," I said quietly. He straightened, dusting off his wrinkled shirt. The gesture was almost nonchalant, but I could see his hands were still shaking. "You'll change your mind," he said, moving to the door. "When you realize what you've done, you'll call me." "I won't." He paused at the door. For a second, I thought, he might apologize, might show a hint of the son I had raised. Instead, he smiled, a cold, empty expression. "We'll see." The door slammed shut, rattling the windows. The sudden silence was suffocating after his storm. I stayed in my chair, listening to his footsteps fade, then the sound of his car engine, starting and driving away. Only then did I get up and approach the broken frame. I carefully knelt and gathered the pieces, noting how the crack had split us apart. Martha on one side, Lionel and me on the other. It was a perfect, intentional symbol. The glass cut my finger as I picked up the largest piece, and a drop of blood fell onto Martha's fractured smile. I carried the damaged photo through the house, turning off the lights Lionel had left on. My footsteps echoed on the wood floors as I made my way to my study. The house felt different now, as if his anger had left invisible scars. My study welcomed me with a familiar warmth, Leather-bound books lined the walls, their spines catching the light from the brass desk lamp. Awards from Apex Tech Solutions gleamed among family photos and mementos. This room was a testament to 40 years of honest work, careful planning, and earned success. I placed the broken frame on my desk and poured 2 fingers of whiskey from the crystal decanter Martha had given me for our 20th anniversary. The amber liquid caught the lamplight, and I stared into it, looking for answers. The armchair by the small fireplace received me like an old friend. From this spot, I could see everything that mattered: the photo albums on the lower shelf, the filing cabinet with important documents, and the desk where I had made the decisions that had built our family's security. Martha always said I was too lenient with the boy. I spoke to the cracked photograph, her fractured smile somehow still radiant. If she were alive, she would have ended this madness years ago. I opened the family album, the pages whispering as I turned them. There was Lionel at 6, gap-toothed and grinning beside his first bicycle. At 12, sullen in his Little League uniform after quitting mid-season. At 16, standing by the car I'd bought him, the same one he'd wrecked. 3 months later, racing his friends. Each picture told a story of wasted potential, of chances given and squandered. But there were other photographs too, hidden beneath these family memories. I pulled out a manila folder labeled Lionel's Financial Records and spread its contents across the coffee table. Bank statements, receipts, check stubs, the paper trail of 20 years of enabling. My hands moved automatically, the calculator clicking as I tallied the amounts: car payments, insurance claims, legal fees, gambling debts. The numbers climbed steadily: 20,000, 50,000, 85,000, 137,000, 462,000. The final figure stared back at me from my notebook, enough to buy a house, to start a small business, to secure a comfortable retirement for someone who had worked honestly their whole life. I sipped the whiskey, feeling it burn its way down my throat. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into its evening quiet. A television somewhere played, its laugh track drifting through an open window. Normal families living normal lives, probably unaware that their neighbor was calculating the cost of his own son's destruction. My wedding photo with Martha caught my attention. We were so young then, full of dreams and plans. She had been a teacher, practical and wise in ways that took me years to truly understand. Even then, she'd worried about spoiling any future children. Children need boundaries, she'd said during one of our late-night conversations about starting a family. Love without limits isn't love. It's harm disguised as affection. I had thought she was overly cautious. Now, sitting among the evidence of my failures as a father, her words felt like a prophecy. The fireplace crackled softly, casting dancing shadows. I remembered my own father, a stern man who taught me the value of hard work through example, not handouts. When I had wanted a bicycle, I had earned it by helping in his shop after school. When I had crashed his truck at 17, I had paid for the repairs with my own savings. "You made a man of me, Dad," I whispered to the flames. What did I make of my son? The answer was in the broken photo on my desk, in the folder of receipts, in the memory of Lionel's cold smile as he had threatened me in my own home. I closed the financial records with a sense of finality, each paper sliding into place with a whisper of resolution. The family album followed, its weight heavy in my hands. These memories would remain, but the pattern they documented would end. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 10 times, its deep notes echoing through the house. Outside, the last of the evening joggers had passed, leaving only the soft rustle of wind in the elm trees. I finished the whiskey and locked the folder in my desk drawer. The key turned with a soft click that seemed to signify an end. Whatever came next, whatever threats Lionel might follow through on, I would not yield. He was 38 years old. If he was going to learn responsibility, it would have to be now, and it would be the hardest way possible. The broken photograph caught the dying light one last time before I turned off the lamp and went upstairs to bed. The quarterly reports, on my desk blurred as I tried to focus. 18 hours had passed since Lionel's explosive exit. 18 hours of fitful sleep, interrupted by memories of his cold smile and the sound of breaking glass. I had arrived at Apex Tech Solutions at 9 sharp, hoping the familiar routine of profit margins and market analysis would clear my mind of family drama. The view from my corner office normally brought me peace, the vast Lake Michigan stretching toward the horizon, the sharp geometry of Chicago's skyline. Today, it felt like I was looking through the bars of a prison. I adjusted the family photo on my desk. This one was intact, showing Martha and Lionel during happier times at the state fair. The contrast with last night's destruction made my chest ache. My secretary's voice on the intercom jolted me from my thoughts. "Mr. Wells, your son Lionel is on the line." The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at the blinking red light on my phone, my hand frozen halfway to the receiver. 15 seconds passed. Then 20. The light blinked patiently, waiting for my decision. Finally, I put down my pen and sat straight in my leather chair, preparing for another assault. "Hello, Lionel." "Dad, I want to apologize for yesterday. I was wrong." The voice was completely different, soft, humble, stripped of its venom. I gripped the phone, searching for the trap in these unexpected words. "This is a surprise, Lionel. Penelope made me see how much you've done for me over the years." His voice held what sounded like genuine shame, or a masterful imitation of it. I let my fear get the best of me, and I said terrible things. "Will you come to dinner tonight, please?" I found myself writing, "Dinner, Lionel's, 7 p.m." in my calendar before my rational mind could catch up. The pen felt heavy as I watched the words appear on the page. "All right, what time?" 7Q. "And Dad?" A pause filled with what sounded like real emotion. "I'm truly sorry." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone as if it could explain what had just happened. My son, who 24 hours ago had threatened me in my own home, was now inviting me to dinner with apologies and humility. I leaned back in my chair, watching afternoon shadows creep across the financial reports on my desk. The numbers meant nothing now, just black marks on white paper, as my mind grappled with the possibilities. Either Lionel had had a miraculous transformation, or this was the most sophisticated manipulation he had ever attempted. The Chicago traffic hummed 23 floors below, a distant reminder of a normal world continuing its predictable patterns, while my family teetered on the edge of something I couldn't yet name. I touched the intact family photo again, studying Lionel's young face before gambling had etched lines of desperation around his eyes, before money had become his only language. My business instincts, honed by 4 decades of deals and negotiations, screamed warnings. But beneath the weariness was something more dangerous. Hope, the treacherous possibility that my son had finally hit rock bottom and was ready to climb back up. I glanced at my watch. 5 hours until dinner. 5 hours to decide if I was walking into a reconciliation or a carefully planned trap. The afternoon stretched ahead like a question mark, and I had no idea what answer awaited me in Wicker Park. The drive home through Chicago's evening traffic gave me too much time to think. Radio stations blurred together as I searched for a distraction, finally settling on classical music that matched my contemplative mood. By the time I reached Oak Park, doubt had hardened into a certainty that something was wrong with Lionel's sudden change of heart. My bedroom welcomed me with familiar order, suits arranged by color in the walk-in closet, Martha's photo smiling from the nightstand. Everything in its proper place. I stood before the mirror, adjusting my tie for the 3rd time, watching my own uncertainty reflected in my eyes. The navy blue suit felt right, respectful, but not over the top, showing I took the dinner invitation seriously without appearing desperate for reconciliation. I checked my wallet methodically. Credit cards, cash, business cards. My phone showed a full battery, which I noted with the precision of a man who had learned to prepare for every contingency. In my study, I paused before the phone, weighing my options. Martha's voice echoed in my memory. Trust but verify, Arthur. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. I dialed Marcus's number, listening to it ring twice before his familiar baritone answered. Arthur, everything all right? Marcus, if I don't call you by midnight, check on Lionel's apartment. I kept my voice calm and matter-of-fact. 1247 North Winchester, Unit 3B. A pause. You want to tell me what's going on? Probably nothing, just humor, an old man's paranoia. You got it. Be careful, Arthur. I hung up and made one final round of the house, checking locks with unusual attention to detail. The security system armed with a soft beep. The housekeeper's note updated with my destination. Each action was methodical, businesslike, as if I were preparing for a board meeting instead of dinner with my son. The broken family photo from last night caught my eye as I passed the living room. Martha's face, bisected by that spiderweb of shattered glass, seemed to watch me with concern. I touched the frame gently, remembering her warnings about being too lenient with Lionel, too willing to excuse his behavior. Maybe you were right all along, I whispered to her image. Outside, my car waited in the driveway. I chose the sedan, instead of the limousine, modest transportation for what I hoped would be a humble evening. The keys felt cold in my hand as I settled behind the wheel, adjusting the mirrors with unnecessary precision. For a moment, I simply sat there, engine off, watching the sun set behind the elm trees that gave our neighborhood its name. Normal. Families were settling in for normal evenings, homework and television, simple conversations over simple meals. When had my life become so complicated that having dinner with my own son required strategic planning? I thought about Lionel's voice on the phone, that unfamiliar humility. Was it possible? Could a man change so completely in 18 hours? My business experience said, no. But my heart whispered, maybe, just maybe. The engine turned over smoothly, and I backed out of the driveway with the deliberate care of someone who suspected this might be a significant journey. Wicker Park was 35 minutes away through evening traffic. 35 minutes to either salvage a relationship or walk into whatever trap my son had prepared. As I turned onto the main road, leaving the safety of my suburban sanctuary, I knew I was about to discover which possibility awaited me. The converted brownstone on North Winchester looked tired in the fading daylight, its brick facade weathered by Chicago winters and neglect. I parked across the street, noting the contrast between this neighborhood and my own. Urban decay creeping through the cracks, young professionals gentrifying block by block, old-timers clinging to familiarity. Lionel met me at the apartment door with a hug that lasted a beat too long, his grip surprisingly strong. Dad, thank you for coming. It means everything. The performance began immediately. His smile was perfect, warm but not overeager, apologetic but not servile. Either my son had truly transformed overnight, or he had spent a considerable amount of time rehearsing this version of himself. Penelope's been cooking all afternoon, he said, leading me into the small living room where mismatched furniture tried to create a sense of harmony. She's so excited to see you. Penelope appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her smile bright but strained around the edges. Mr. Wells, welcome. I hope you're hungry. The apartment revealed their financial reality in careful details. Carpet that needed replacing, a coffee table with rings from countless meals, bills stacked on a side table with glimpses of red, overdue, stamps. But everything was clean, and Penelope had tried to make it welcoming with plants and family photos. During dinner, Lionel performed his redemption with Academy Award precision. Dad, I've decided to quit gambling forever. I know how much pain I've caused you, and I want to make it right. That's wonderful to hear, son. I watched his face, carefully noting how his eyes didn't quite match his words. What changed your mind? Seeing you yesterday, realizing what I was putting you through, Penelope helped me understand that I was destroying everything that mattered. Penelope's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it quickly, her face paling. "Excuse me, I need to check this message." "Everything all right, Penelope? You seem troubled." No, just work." Her laugh was too high, too quick. "The principal wants teachers to review lesson plans over the weekend." But her hands trembled as she set the phone down, and I noticed she had received 7 messages during our meal. For a teacher on a Tuesday evening, that seemed excessive. Lionel filled the silence with stories of his newfound perspective, each one polished and unconvincing. He asked about my business with unusual interest, inquired about my health with exaggerated concern, and reminisced about family memories with forced nostalgia. "Remember when we went fishing at Lake Geneva?" he said, refilling my wine glass. "You taught me patience that day." I remembered that trip differently. Lionel complaining about the early hour, abandoning his fishing rod after 20 minutes, spending the day sulking in the cabin. But I nodded and smiled, playing my own role in this strange theater. Penelope grew increasingly agitated as the evening went on. She dropped her fork twice, spilled water, reaching for the salt, and jumped visibly each time her phone buzzed. When she excused herself to the kitchen, I heard a whispered conversation, though with whom I couldn't tell. "She's been stressed. About work," Lionel explained, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Budget cuts. You know how schools are." I studied the apartment while he spoke, noting details that told their real story. Poker chips visible in a drawer he had opened. Carelessly, empty wine bottles lined up by the back door. More than 2 people should accumulate quickly. A gym membership cancellation notice on the counter. "The meal is delicious," I said truthfully. Penelope had prepared herb-crusted chicken with evident care despite their obvious financial constraints. "You're lucky to have such a thoughtful wife." Lionel's smile flickered for a moment. "Yes, she's very supportive." When Penelope returned from another mysterious phone call, her wedding ring caught the light. She had been twisting it constantly, a nervous habit that spoke of deep anxiety. Whatever was troubling her went far beyond lesson plans and budget cuts. "Mr. Wells," she said suddenly, what do you do when someone you care about is in real danger?" Lionel's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Honey, that's a strange question." "I was just thinking about that new story," she said quickly. "The one about the missing businessman." But her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and in that look, I saw something that chilled me. Genuine fear and a desperate need to communicate something she couldn't say aloud. I finished my wine and set the glass down with a sense of finality. "Thank you both for a lovely evening. I should head home." As I stood to leave, a certainty settled in my chest like a stone. Something was very wrong here, and whatever it was, Penelope knew about it. The cool autumn evening wrapped around me like a familiar blanket as I descended the steps from Lionel's building. 55 degrees, according to the weather app I had checked earlier, perfect for the 45-minute walk home through Chicago's winding neighborhoods. I needed the time to think, to process what I had witnessed during that strange dinner performance. Wicker Park's trendy streets buzzed with Tuesday night energy. Couples emerged from trendy cocktail bars, young professionals grabbed late dinners at bistros with outdoor seating. The contrast with Lionel's cramped apartment and Penelope's nervous energy was stark. Here was the Chicago my son could have thrived in if he had made different choices. I pulled my jacket tighter and began the familiar route toward Oak Park. My mind was methodically cataloging the evening's inconsistencies, Penelope's constant phone checking, Lionel's rehearsed stories of redemption, the poker chips I had glimpsed in their kitchen drawer. My business instincts, honed by 40 years of evaluating people and situations, screamed that something was fundamentally wrong. The commercial district gradually gave way to quieter residential streets. Streetlights became more sporadic, casting pools of yellow light connected by stretches of shadow. I passed a 24-hour diner where shift workers grabbed coffee, a closed bookstore with handwritten signs advertising poetry readings, empty bus stop benches waiting for tomorrow's commuters. At 9:47 p.m., 17 minutes into my walk, my phone buzzed against my chest. I stopped beneath a particularly bright streetlight, noting the unknown number on the screen. "Don't forget to look around you." I stared at the message, reading it twice, before my fingers moved to reply. "Is this a threat?" The response came immediately. "This is rescue. Some psycho or kids playing pranks." I tried calling the number back but got the automated message. "The number you have dialed is not in service." Years of business had taught me to document everything, so I took screenshots of both messages before sliding the phone back into my jacket pocket, but I kept it easily accessible. The next few blocks felt different. Sound seemed amplified. My own footsteps on the concrete, the distant hum of traffic, a dog barking somewhere in the darkness. I found myself glancing over my shoulder more frequently, though I told myself it was just paranoia brought on by cryptic texts and family drama. Then I noticed the car. A black sedan moved slower than traffic warranted, maintaining the same distance behind me for 3 blocks. When I crossed at the light, it crossed. When I turned down a side street to test my suspicions, its headlights followed, cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. My heart rate increased, and not just from the physical exertion of walking. Martha's voice echoed in my memory. "Trust your instincts, Arthur. They've kept you alive in business. They'll keep you alive everywhere else." The sedan crept closer, its engine purring like a satisfied cat. I could make out 2 figures in the front seats, though the tinted windows obscured their faces. My pace unconsciously quickened, muscle memory from childhood games of hide-and-seek suddenly feeling relevant again. Empty streets stretched ahead, residential blocks where porch lights offered minimal illumination. The contrast with Wicker Park's bustling energy was striking. Here, I was alone with whatever intentions lurked behind those headlights. I turned down another side street, my business shoes clicking on the pavement with increasing urgency. The car's turn signal blinked once, twice before it followed me into the shadows. No longer a coincidence, no longer paranoia. I was being hunted. The black sedan accelerated as I broke into what could generously be called a fast walk. At 65, my running days were mostly behind me, but desperation provided motivation that my joints couldn't ignore. Behind me, car doors slammed with the finality of a judge's gavel. "Stop, old man. We just need to talk." The voice carried authority mixed with annoyance, like a teacher calling after a truant student. But teachers don't pursue people through dark Chicago alleys, and something in the speaker's tone suggested our conversation wouldn't be pleasant. "Police! Help!" I shouted, though the residential street remained stubbornly empty. Porch lights stayed off, windows remained dark. Tuesday night in a working-class neighborhood meant early bedtimes and minds focused on tomorrow's responsibilities. "Shut up and get him!" A second voice, younger and more aggressive, shouted. Heavy footsteps echoed behind me, gaining ground despite my best efforts. I ducked into an alley between 2 row houses, using parked cars and overflowing garbage cans as obstacles between myself and my pursuers. My chest tightened with each labored breath. The physical exertion combined with adrenaline created a dangerous cocktail for a man my age, exactly the kind of stress my doctor had warned me to avoid. But stopping wasn't an option when anonymous voices discussed getting me in tones that suggested violence. The alley opened onto another street, this one darker and more industrial. Loading docks and storage buildings created a maze of shadows and hiding places. I pressed myself against a brick wall, feeling the cold seep through my jacket while my heart hammered against my ribs. Where did that old guy go? He can't have gotten far. Split up. You check the left side. I'll take the right. Their coordination suggested experience with this kind of work, not random criminals looking for a quick robbery, but professionals executing a specific plan. The realization made my blood run cold. I saw salvation in the form of an old warehouse tucked behind a row of closed shops. The door was slightly ajar, probably forgotten by the last worker. With my pursuers' voices growing closer, I made a desperate sprint across the open space. "What do you want from me?" I gasped, though they were already out of earshot. The warehouse smelled of motor oil, old wood, and years of accumulated dust. Tools hung from wall hooks, paint cans created small mountains in corners, and wooden crates provided perfect cover for a man trying to become invisible. I positioned myself behind the largest stack, struggling to quiet my breathing while my heart continued its frantic rhythm. Through the dirty windows I could see flashlight beams sweeping the alley. My hunters had come prepared, which meant this wasn't a spontaneous act. Someone had planned this encounter, someone who knew my routine and predicted my walking route home. The warehouse door creaked ominously as one of them tried it. I held my breath, pressing myself deeper into the shadows behind the crates. Dust particles danced in the thin beam of light that penetrated my hiding place, and I fought the urge to sneeze. "Check in there." "Nah, it's locked up tight. Old man's probably halfway to Oak Park by now." Their voices grew fainter as they moved away from my hiding spot, but I stayed frozen in place. Martha had always said, "Patience is your greatest business asset." Tonight, it might save my life. Outside, car doors slammed again, followed by the sound of an engine starting. I waited another 15 minutes, counting each second before finally allowing myself to breathe normally. Whatever was happening, whoever these men were, I was certain of one thing. This wasn't random crime. Someone had sent them specifically for me. Crouched behind wooden crates that smelled of decades-old paint and forgotten projects, I waited in the musty darkness of the warehouse. My heart had finally slowed to a near-normal rhythm, though the tightness in my chest lingered like an unwelcome reminder of my age and limitations. Through the grimy windows, I could see my pursuers' flashlight beams sweeping the alley with methodical precision. Where did that old guy disappear to? The first voice carried frustration and professional annoyance. Maybe he managed to hide somewhere. It's pretty dark out here. The second man sounded younger, less experienced, possibly questioning the wisdom of this nighttime chase. I shifted carefully behind the crates, trying to find a position where I could hear without risking discovery. A paint can brushed against my elbow, creating a soft scraping sound that made me freeze completely. The flashlight beams paused in their sweep, and for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Silence dominated the alley. "Lionel won't pay us for nothing. We need to find him." The words hit me like a physical blow. Lionel. My son, the boy I'd raised, educated, and supported through countless failures and mistakes, had hired these men to hunt me through Chicago's dark streets. The dinner invitation, the humble apologies, Penelope's nervous behavior, all of it was orchestrated theater designed to put me in this very position. Forget it. He's already scared. We'll try again tomorrow. I covered my mouth with both hands, not trusting myself to remain silent as the full magnitude of my son's betrayal sank in. Every instinct screamed to confront this impossible reality, to demand explanations that could somehow make sense of a son paying strangers to terrorize his own father. Boss said just to scare him anyway, right? Make him think twice about refusing. Family. Yeah, but if we can't find him, how's he going to know he was scared? They were moving away now, their voices becoming fainter as they searched other areas of the alley system. But I remained motionless, processing not just their words, but the casual tone in which they discussed my fear as a commodity to be purchased and delivered. The car engines started again, followed by the sound of tires on gravel as they drove away. Still, I waited another 15 minutes, counting each second while my mind wrestled with a new and horrifying reality. My son, the baby Martha had nursed through a fever, the child who had run to me after nightmares, the young man I had believed could still be saved, had crossed a line that transformed him from a wayward son to a genuine threat. When I finally emerged from my hiding place, the alley felt different. It was no longer just a route between destinations, but a battlefield where I had learned that family bonds could be weaponized against love itself. The cool night air carried the scent of approaching rain, and, in the distance, the city hummed, with its usual indifference to personal tragedies. Penelope's warning text made perfect sense now. She had known what was planned, had risked her own safety to warn a man she barely knew, because her conscience couldn't bear watching an intimidation plot disguised as a family intervention. While her husband plotted my terror, she had chosen to become my unlikely guardian angel. I needed to call Marcus, needed to involve the police, needed to document everything before Lionel could construct plausible denials or eliminate evidence. But first, I needed to get to a place of safety, somewhere public enough that hired thugs wouldn't dare approach. The 24-hour diner I had passed beckoned like a lighthouse in a storm, its neon sign promising sanctuary and witnesses. As I emerged from the alley and began walking toward those welcoming lights, I realized my son had succeeded in one goal tonight. He had definitely scared me, but not in the way he had intended. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour convenience store buzzed overhead as I fumbled with coins at the payphone, my hands trembling so violently that quarters slipped through my fingers twice before I managed to dial 911. The young clerk behind the bulletproof glass watched me with mild concern, probably assuming I was another late-night drunk having a crisis. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report an attempted assault. 2 men chased me through alleys near Wicker Park. I want to speak with Detective Mason Richards at District 18. The operator's voice remained professionally calm. Sir, are you injured? Do you need medical attention? No, I'm safe now, but Detective Richards is expecting my call. Tell him it's Arthur Wells. 20 minutes later, Mason's patrol car pulled into the convenience store parking lot with practiced efficiency. Through the window, I watched him emerge. Tall, solid, wearing the expression of a man who had seen enough late-night emergencies to remain calm regardless of the circumstances. Arthur, he approached with careful steps, noting my torn jacket and disheveled appearance. What happened to you? The relief of seeing a friendly face, someone trained to handle situations beyond my business experience, nearly overwhelmed me. Mason, I think my son wants to kill me. We sat in his patrol car while I provided every detail I could remember: the dinner invitation, Penelope's nervous behavior, the warning text message, the black sedan that had hunted me through Chicago's dark streets. Mason took methodical notes, asking specific questions about timing, locations, and physical descriptions. You said one of them mentioned Lionel by name? Lionel won't pay us for nothing. We need to find him. I repeated the words exactly as I had heard them. They were hired, Mason. My own son paid criminals to terrorize me. Mason photographed the warning text messages on my phone before the battery died completely. We'll need you to come to the station and make a formal statement. Can you describe the vehicle in more detail? Black sedan, probably a Toyota Camry, Illinois plates, though I only caught part of the number. Small dent on the passenger side, tinted windows, 2 men, both, appeared to be in their 30s. Within minutes, Mason had issued a bulletin alert through dispatch. The efficiency of police procedure contrasted sharply with the chaos I had experienced just hours earlier. Here was order, a system, the rule of law, responding to criminal behavior with appropriate force. At District 18, the police station hummed with late-night activity. Radio chatter provided a constant background noise. Phones rang with the persistence of urban emergency, and officers processed paperwork with the methodical attention of civil servants who understood that details mattered. In courtrooms. "Arthur, that's a serious accusation. Are you certain about what you heard?" I met his eyes steadily. "One of those guys said Lionel's name. They were hired by him." Mason's expression hardened. "We'll find them. Your description of the car is detailed enough to work with." As I signed my formal statement, documenting every moment from dinner to discovery, Mason coordinated with patrol units, searching for the black sedan. The business part of my mind appreciated the systematic approach, evidence collection, witness statements, coordination between departments. But underneath the procedural calm, fury burned at the calculated nature of my son's betrayal. My phone, plugged into a charger Mason had provided, buzzed with a radio call. "Detective Richards, we have a vehicle matching the description parked outside an apartment building in Pilsen." Mason grabbed his jacket, adrenaline sharpening his professional demeanor. "Arthur, we may have found them." Radio chatter filled District 18 as Mason coordinated the arrest operation from his desk, surrounded by the controlled chaos of night shift. Police work. I watched through the window as backup units moved through Chicago's early morning streets, converging on an apartment building where two criminals waited, probably celebrating what they believed was a successful intimidation. Unit 47. Confirm the license plate matches the witness description. "Affirmative, Detective. Illinois Delta, Charlie 7219. Vehicle is cold. Suspects are likely inside the building." The arrest took less than 30 minutes. Victor Moretti and Vincent Rodriguez, ages 32 and 29 respectively, were taken into custody without resistance. Both had prior records for assault and intimidation. Professional muscle for hire, exactly the type of men Lionel would contact through his gambling connections. Mason separated them immediately, using standard interrogation techniques I recognized from television but had never witnessed in person. Victor broke first, probably calculating that cooperation might reduce his sentence. "Arthur, we found them, and we have a confession." I looked up from the police station coffee that had grown, cold in my hands. "What did they say?" "Listen, this Lionel Wells paid us $5,000 to scare the old man." Mason read from his notes, his voice carrying professional disgust. "Half up front, half on completion. They were supposed to make it look like a random street crime." "Scare? They wanted to kill me." Mason's expression grew grimmer. "There's more. Lionel told them you have a heart condition. He said strong fear could finish you without them laying a finger on you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down heavily in the plastic chair, feeling every one of my 65 years. My son hadn't just hired criminals to threaten me. He had weaponized my own mortality, using medical information shared in confidence to orchestrate what would have appeared to be a natural death. He knew about my heart condition. The statement came out as barely a whisper. "I told him last Christmas that my doctor was monitoring irregular rhythms." Victor's phone shows text messages arranging the job. Bank records will show Lionel's payment. We have enough evidence to arrest him for solicitation of assault, possibly attempted murder. Vincent corroborated every detail of Victor's confession, both men realizing that their amateur-hour criminal enterprise had crossed lines that carried serious prison time. They described meeting Lionel at a coffee shop near his apartment, where he had provided my photo, my address, and specific instructions about using my heart condition to create a natural death. "The plan was elegant," Mason said, reviewing their statements. "Scare you badly enough to trigger a heart attack, then disappear. No physical assault, no direct murder, just an old man who died from the stress of random street crime. Evidence accumulated with the mechanical precision of professional law enforcement. Text messages between Lionel and Victor arranging payment. Surveillance footage from near the coffee shop showing their meeting. Bank records tracing money from Lionel's account to Victor's. My son had been thorough but not careful, leaving a paper trail that would satisfy any prosecutor. "He's at home right now," Mason said, preparing the arrest warrant, probably sleeping peacefully, assuming his plan worked. I asked to be present when they arrested Lionel, though Mason insisted I remain in a police vehicle at a safe distance. Some twisted part of me needed to see my son's face when he realized his carefully orchestrated murder had become evidence in his own trial. "Mason, I need to understand something." I looked at the confession statement spread across his desk. "How long does someone spend in prison for trying to kill their father with gambling debts and your testimony about a financial motive?" 15 to 20 years minimum. This isn't a crime of passion, it's premeditated attempted murder. As Mason and his team prepared for Lionel's arrest, I remained alone in the station, surrounded by the institutional sounds of justice processing criminal behavior. My son, the baby who had once fallen asleep in my arms, had calculated the exact amount of fear required to stop my heart. The magnitude of that betrayal settled over me like a blanket made of ice. Dawn filtered through the police station windows as I dozed fitfully in a chair Mason had positioned in a quiet corner of the detective bullpen. The institutional coffee had long since grown cold, but the caffeine and adrenaline kept real sleep at bay. At 8 a.m. sharp, Mason returned with fresh coffee and news that would close this chapter of my life forever. Lionel's in custody, arrested at home at 6:30 this morning without incident. I straightened in the uncomfortable chair, feeling my muscles protest from the night's activities. How did he react? Complete shock. He tried claiming innocence, until we showed him Victor's confession and the bank records. Then he broke down completely. Mason settled at his desk, organizing paperwork with professional efficiency. He admitted to everything. My phone, fully charged overnight, buzzed with an incoming message, the unknown number that had saved my life. I had almost forgotten about that mysterious warning in the chaos of arrests and confessions. I typed carefully, "Thank you for saving my life. Who are you?" The response arrived within minutes. "I'm Penelope. I couldn't let him do this. You're a good person." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by questions. "Why didn't you stop him earlier?" I was afraid, but when I realized he was really going to, "I'm sorry." Through subsequent messages, Penelope explained how she had discovered Lionel's, planned the day before our dinner, found herself torn between loyalty to her husband and basic human decency, and eventually bought a burner phone to send an anonymous warning. She was filing for divorce and had already agreed to testify against Lionel in exchange for immunity. "She saved your life," Mason observed, reading over my shoulder. "That warning text gave you the awareness you needed to recognize the chase for what it was." The legal proceedings would be straightforward. Lionel faced charges of solicitation of assault and attempted murder. Victor and Vincent would likely accept plea deals in exchange for their testimony. With confessions, bank records, and text message evidence, the case was prosecutorial gold. "I want to see him," I told Mason one last time. The meeting took place in an interview room at the station. Lionel sat in orange jail coveralls, his hands cuffed to the table, looking smaller and more pathetic than I had ever seen him. Gone was the aggressive manipulator from Monday night, replaced by a broken man who had gambled away not just money, but any hope of redemption. "Dad, I was desperate. Those people were going to... You made your choice." I kept my voice level, businesslike. "I gave you everything and you chose to try to kill me for more. It wasn't supposed to be murder, just enough to stop my heart, using information I had shared with you in confidence. I stood to leave. You are no longer my son." Later that morning, back home with a police escort, I called my lawyer to begin the process of changing my will. Lionel's name would be removed completely, his inheritance redirected to charitable organizations and a trust fund for Penelope's future. She had shown more moral courage in one text message than her husband had demonstrated in 38 years. In my study, Surrounded by family photographs that would need updating, I reflected on Martha's wisdom. She had understood Lionel's nature better than I had, warned me repeatedly about enabling his destructive behavior. If she were alive, she would have stopped this madness years ago through sheer force of maternal authority. The broken family. Photo from Monday night still sat on my desk, its cracked glass creating prismatic reflections in the morning sunlight. I placed it carefully in the trash along with any remaining illusions about the son I thought I was protecting. Justice would run its course through proper legal channels. Lionel would serve his time, Victor and Vincent would face consequences for their choices, and Penelope would build a new life free from the toxicity that had nearly consumed us all. For the first time in years, I could plan for the future without wondering what crisis Lionel would create next. Apex Tech Solutions would continue under new leadership. My wealth would benefit worthy causes, and I could finally live without looking over my shoulder for the next manipulation. Sometimes, cutting toxic people out of your life, even family, is the only way to find peace. As the door to the interview room closed behind me, I felt a strange sense of finality. The last link to the old Lionel was severed. My conversation with the police, with my lawyer, and my quiet, unyielding departure from the station had all been about a resolution, not a reconciliation. I walked out into the cool morning air, the city already humming with life, and I felt a freedom I hadn't realized I'd lost. The sun was fully up now, its light glinting off the polished windows of the police station. It was a new day, and for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to it. I returned home, my house feeling different yet again. It was no longer a place marked by fear and conflict, but a sanctuary, a quiet place where I could begin to heal. The first thing I did was go to my study. I looked at the broken family photograph, the shattered glass over Martha's face. It was a painful reminder, but no longer a source of my despair. I carefully picked up the frame, the jagged edges still sharp. I had saved it as evidence of my son's betrayal, but now it was just a piece of debris from a storm that had passed. I put it in the trash, the glass making a soft, final sound as it settled among the other refuse. My focus shifted to my will. It had been years since I'd looked at it, but my lawyer was already on the phone, ready to make the changes I had requested. I had decided to leave my fortune to a foundation for ethical technology, a cause I had always believed in, and a separate trust fund for Penelope. She had shown more courage and integrity in a single night than my son had in a lifetime. I sat in my study, surrounded by the objects of my life's work, my books, my awards, the albums full of memories, both good and bad. I opened the album and looked at a photograph of Martha and me, young and hopeful, on our wedding day. She had understood the truth about our son from the beginning. She had known that love without boundaries was destructive, and she had tried to teach me that. I had failed to listen, and I had paid a terrible price. But now, it was over. The toxic cycle was broken. I could now grieve the son I had lost and the family I had hoped to have, and begin to build a new life for myself. I would not live in fear or regret. I would live in the memory of the love that had guided me, and the wisdom that had saved me. Sometimes cutting toxic people out of your life, even family, is the only way to find peace. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.